The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was bigger than any building Han Solo had ever seen. The ceiling stretched so high above him that he could barely see it. Lights from 1,000 different worlds glowed softly in the darkness. Representatives from hundreds of alien species sat in rows that curved around the central floor. Some had fur, some had scales, some looked like they were made of pure light. Han Solo stood in the middle of it all, feeling very small and very human. His uniform was clean and pressed. The sword at his side was old, very old. The leather wrap on the handle was worn smooth from generations of hands holding it. His grandfather had carried this blade. His great-grandfather before that. The metal was simple steel, folded and hammered by masters who had spent their whole lives learning how to make swords. There was nothing fancy about it. No glowing edges, no power source, just metal and wood and leather. The alien standing across from him was not small. Rextal was nearly 3 meters tall. Its body was covered in thick armor plates that looked like they grew from its skin. 4 powerful arms hung at its sides. Each arm ended in hands that could crush stone. Its eyes were black and cold. When it looked at Han Solo, it looked at something weak, something that would break easily. Rextal laughed. The sound came out through a translator device on its chest. The laugh was deep and mocking. It echoed through the Great Hall. Many of the other aliens joined in the laughter. They pointed at Han Solo. They pointed at his sword. To them it was funny. A human with an old piece of metal, a primitive weapon from a primitive world. The leader of the council raised one of its many tentacles. The laughter stopped. The alien's voice came through speakers all around the hall. It spoke in the common trade language that all species used. Han Solo's earpiece translated the words into Korean. The council leader asked if Han Solo understood what he was doing. It explained that this was a formal challenge. By ancient law, if Han Solo lost, humanity would have no voice in the council for 100 years. Earth would lose all trading rights. Human ships would be banned from most of the galaxy. Everything that humans had worked for in the past 50 years would be gone. Han Solo bowed. He said he understood. His voice was calm and quiet. He did not sound scared. He did not sound angry. He just sounded ready. Rextal laughed again. It reached to its back and pulled out its weapon. The weapon hummed with power. Blue energy crackled along its edges. The blade was made of plasma held in place by magnetic fields. It could cut through steel like paper. It could melt rock. It could punch through the armor of a battle tank. Rextal had used this weapon to win 300 duels. It had never lost. Not once. The alien held up the plasma blade. It wanted everyone to see. It turned in a slow circle, showing off the weapon to the crowd. The blade left trails of light in the air. The heat from it made the air shimmer and wave. Even from several meters away, Han Solo could feel the warmth on his face. Then Rextal pointed the weapon at Han Solo. Through its translator, it said that this would be over quickly. It said that humans were weak. It said that human weapons were toys. It said that humanity did not belong among the stars. They should go back to their little planet and stay there. Many of the aliens in the crowd made sounds of agreement. Han Solo did not respond to the insults. He simply placed his hand on the handle of his sword. His fingers wrapped around the worn leather. The grip felt familiar, comfortable. It fit his hand perfectly, just as it had fit his grandfather's hand, just as it had fit his great-grandfather's hand. 12 generations had held this sword. 12 generations had practiced with it, trained with it, perfected their skills with it. The council leader announced that the duel would take place at dawn. Both fighters would meet in the grand arena. The rules were simple. The fight would continue until one fighter could not continue, or until one fighter surrendered. There would be no outside help. No weapons except the ones they carried. No armor except what they wore now. Rextal made a gesture with all 4 arms. It was a dismissive wave. The alien turned and walked away from the center floor. Its heavy footsteps shook the ground slightly. Other aliens crowded around it, congratulating it on its upcoming victory. Some were already making bets on how long the human would last. Most thought less than a minute. Some thought less than 30 seconds. Han Solo stayed in the center of the floor for a moment longer. He looked up at the high ceiling. He thought about Earth. He thought about the billions of people there who were counting on him. He thought about the human colonies scattered across the nearby stars. He thought about his teacher, Master Byung-ho, who had trained him since he was 6 years old. The old master had given him this sword 3 years ago, On the day Han Sol had completed his training, Master Byung-ho had said something that day. He had said that the sword was just metal. The real weapon was the person holding it. The sword could be broken, the sword could be lost, but the training, the discipline, the thousands of hours of practice could never be taken away. Those things lived in the warrior's body, in their mind. In their spirit, Han Sol finally turned and walked toward the exit. A human woman was waiting for him there. Lieutenant Jiwoo was his second for this duel. She had been his friend since they were children. They had trained together under Master Byung-ho. She knew how good Han Sol was, but she also knew how dangerous Vrextal was. Her face showed worry. As they walked through the halls of the council building, Jiwoo asked if Han Sol was scared. He thought about the question. Then he said yes. He was scared. Fear was natural. Master Byung-ho had taught them that fear was not the enemy. Fear kept you alert. Fear kept you careful. The real enemy was letting fear control you. They reached their quarters. The room was small but clean. Han Sol sat on the floor and began to meditate. This was part of his training. Every day for 20 years, he had spent at least an hour in meditation. It cleared his mind. It calmed his breathing. It helped him focus on what was important. Jiwoo sat across from him. She did not meditate. Instead, she watched him. She had seen him fight many times. She knew his speed, his precision, his control, but she had also seen recordings of Vrextal. The alien was incredibly strong, incredibly fast for something so large, and that plasma weapon could kill with a single touch. The night passed slowly. Han Sol did not sleep much. He practiced his breathing. He visualized the fight. He went through the techniques in his mind. Strike, block, counter, move, flow like water, be like the wind. These were the things Master Byung-ho had taught him. When dawn came, the sky outside their window turned from black to deep blue to orange. Han Sol stood. He picked up his sword. He checked the blade one more time. The edge was perfect, sharp enough to cut paper with barely any pressure, strong enough to strike steel without breaking. It was a masterpiece of human craftsmanship. But to the aliens, it was just an old piece of metal. They would learn differently soon. The arena was waiting. The grand arena was enormous. It was built into the side of a mountain, carved from solid rock over 1,000 years ago. Seats rose up in circles, tier after tier, until they disappeared into the morning mist. Already, those seats were filling with aliens from every corner of the galaxy. They came in ships. They came through teleportation gates. They came to watch what they all believed would be a very short fight. The arena floor was flat and covered in white sand. The sand came from a moon far away where warriors had fought for centuries. It was tradition. The sand would show blood clearly. It would show where fighters fell. It was meant to remind everyone that duels were serious, that honor had a price. Han Sol stood in a small room beneath the arena. He could hear the crowd above. The sound was like ocean waves rising and falling. Jiwoo was with him. She helped him stretch his muscles. She checked his uniform one last time. She made sure his boots were tied correctly. Small things, but in a fight, small things could matter. Jiwoo asked if he wanted to review the plan. Han Sol shook his head. There was no plan. Not really. Master Byung-ho had taught them that plans broke as soon as the fight started. Instead, you trained your body to react without thinking. You trained your mind to see opportunities. You trained your spirit to stay calm no matter what happened. That was better than any plan. A door at the far end of the room opened. A council official entered. It was a tall alien with gray skin and too many eyes. It said that it was time. The official led Han Sol through a tunnel. The tunnel sloped upward. The sound of the crowd grew louder with each step. Light appeared at the end of the tunnel. Bright sunlight. The roar of thousands of voices. Han Sol stepped out into the arena. The noise hit him like a physical force. Aliens were cheering. Some were chanting Vrextal's name. Some were making sounds that Han Sol's translator could not interpret. He walked to the center of the white sand. The morning sun was warm on his face. The sky above was clear and blue. It almost looked like Earth's sky. That was a small comfort. Another tunnel opened on the opposite side of the arena. Vrextal emerged. The alien raised all four arms above its head. The crowd exploded with noise. They loved Vrextal, the undefeated champion, the warrior who had brought glory to its species, the fighter who had never known defeat. Rextal walked slowly across the sand. It wanted everyone to see. It wore ceremonial armor now. The plates were polished until they shined like mirrors. Symbols were carved into the metal. Each symbol represented a victory. There were hundreds of symbols. The alien's plasma blade hung at its side, dark and quiet for now. The two fighters stood facing each other in the center of the arena. Rextal looked down at Hansol. The height difference was significant. The alien was almost twice as tall. Its shoulders were 3 times as wide. Each of its 4 arms was thicker than Hansol's entire body. The alien smiled. At least Hansol thought it was a smile. The expression looked cruel. The council leader's voice boomed across the arena from hidden speakers. It announced the rules again. Fight until one cannot continue, or until one surrenders. No outside interference. Victory meant honor for your species. Defeat meant shame and loss of status. Did both fighters understand? Both Hansol and Rextal indicated that they did. Rextal drew its plasma blade. The weapon came alive with a sound like thunder. Blue energy blazed along its length. The heat from it made the air ripple. Some of the sand near Rextal's feet began to turn black from the heat. The alien held the weapon high, showing it to the crowd. They cheered even louder. Then Rextal turned to face a row of combat drones that had been placed at the side of the arena. These were military-grade machines. They were used for training elite soldiers. Each one had armor plating and shield generators. They were designed to take punishment. Rextal moved. For something so large it moved fast. The plasma blade struck the first drone. There was a flash of light. The sound of metal screaming. The drone split in half. Pieces of molten metal dripped onto the sand. The alien did not stop. It spun and struck again. The second drone exploded. Sparks flew everywhere. The third drone tried to activate its shields. It did not matter. The plasma blade punched through the shields like they were made of paper. In less than 10 seconds, all 5 drones were destroyed. Smoking pieces of metal lay scattered across the sand. The crowd went wild. They had seen Rextal's power before, but it never got old. This was what a real weapon could do. This was what advanced technology could accomplish. And this human thought he could win with an old sword? Rextal turned back to face Hansol. The alien was breathing heavily, but not from tiredness. From excitement. From the thrill of showing its power. It spoke through its translator. It said that Hansol should surrender now, save himself the pain, save humanity the embarrassment. There was no shame in admitting you were outmatched. Hansol did not respond with words. Instead, he drew his sword. The movement was smooth, practiced. The blade came out of its sheath with barely a whisper of sound. In the bright sunlight, the metal gleamed. It was beautiful in its simplicity. No glow, no hum of power, just steel that had been folded 10,000 times, just a blade that had been sharpened to perfection. Some aliens in the crowd laughed. Others made sounds of pity. A very few, leaned forward in their seats. These were the ones who had studied human culture. They knew that humans had been making swords for thousands of years. They knew that human martial arts went back to the very beginning of human civilization. They knew that maybe, just maybe, there was more to this human than met the eye. Hansol took his stance. His feet were shoulder-width apart. His knees were slightly bent. The sword was held in both hands, the blade pointing forward and slightly down. It was a basic stance, one that students learned in their first year of training. But the way Hansol held it was different. There was a calmness to it, a readiness, like a coiled spring waiting to release. In the viewing box reserved for human diplomats, Admiral Tae-young watched carefully. He was old now. His hair was white. His face was lined with age, but his eyes were still sharp. He had been a warrior once, many years ago. He had trained under the same master as Hansol. He knew what the young captain was capable of, but he also knew the odds. Even skill had its limits when facing such a difference in power. Or did it? The council leader raised one tentacle, the signal to begin. The tentacle held there for a moment. The entire arena seemed to hold its breath. Thousands of aliens waited to see the human fall, waited to see their champion prove once again that might made right. That technology was superior to tradition, that the old ways were dead. The tentacle fell. The duel began. Rextal roared. The sound echoed off the stone walls of the arena. The alien charged forward, all 4 arms moving, the plasma blade cutting through the air. Each step shook the ground. Sand flew up behind its feet. It closed the distance in seconds. The blade came down toward Han Solo's head with enough force to split him in half. Han Solo moved. He did not think about moving. His body simply reacted. 20 years of training took over. He stepped to the side. Not a large movement, just enough. The plasma blade missed him by centimeters. He could feel the heat of it on his skin, could smell the ozone in the air, but the blade did not touch him. And where the blade was, Han Solo was not. The crowd gasped. Vrextal dropped to one knee. The movement was not voluntary. The alien's leg simply gave out. Too many cuts. Too much blood loss. Too much exhaustion. The plasma blade was still in its hand, but the weapon was pointing down now, toward the sand. Not toward Han Solo. The arena was still silent. No one cheered. No one made a sound. They were all trying to process what they had just witnessed. The undefeated champion was on its knees. The human was still standing. Still calm. Still holding that simple sword that should not have been able to do any of this. Han Solo lowered his sword. He did not point it at the alien. Did not make any threatening moves. He simply stood there waiting, giving Vrextal a choice. The duel could end here. No one else needed to get hurt. Honor had been satisfied. The point had been made. Vrextal looked up at him. The alien's eyes were different now. The coldness was gone. The arrogance was gone. In their place was something that looked like understanding, maybe even respect. The alien's chest heaved with each breath. Pain showed on its face. But there was also something else. Curiosity. Through its translator, Vrextal asked a question. How had this happened? The alien's weapon was more advanced, more powerful. Its armor was the best that technology could provide. Its training had been thorough and brutal. It had fought hundreds of battles, won hundreds of victories. How had a human with an old piece of metal defeated all of that? Han Solo walked closer. He stopped a respectful distance away, close enough to talk, far enough to be safe. He looked at the alien warrior, at the wounds he had inflicted, at the pride that had been broken along with the body. Then he spoke. His words were quiet, but they carried across the silent arena. He said that the weapon did not matter as much as everyone thought. A better weapon was useful, yes, but it was not everything. The alien had relied on technology, on power, on overwhelming force. Those things were important, but they were not enough. Not against someone who had spent their entire life mastering their craft. Han Solo explained that humans had been making swords for 10,000 years. At first the swords were crude, simple, but each generation of smiths learned from the previous one. They discovered better ways to fold the metal, better ways to temper it, better ways to create an edge that would hold. 10,000 years of accumulated knowledge went into making the blade he held, and for just as long humans had been learning how to use those swords. Masters taught students. Students became masters and taught new students. Techniques were refined, improved, perfected. What worked was kept. What did not work was discarded, generation after generation, century after century, until the art of the sword became something more than just fighting. It became a way of life. He told Vrextal that he had trained for 20 years, every single day, sometimes for hours, sometimes for minutes, but every day without fail. He had practiced the same movements thousands of times, tens of thousands of times, until his muscles knew them without thinking, until his body could react faster than his mind could process. But it was not just physical training. Master Byung-ho had taught him to train his mind as well. Meditation, breathing exercises, learning to stay calm under pressure, learning to see opportunities that others missed, learning to be patient, to wait for the right moment, to never act out of anger or fear or pride. Han Solo said that Vrextal was strong, fast, skilled. The alien had won 300 duels for good reason. It was a formidable warrior. But it had won those duels because its opponents had relied on strength against strength, technology against technology. They had tried to overpower it, and no one could overpower Vrextal. The alien was too strong, but Han Solo had not tried to overpower it. He had not tried to match strength with strength. Instead, he had been like water. Water did not fight against stone. Water flowed around it, found the cracks, the weaknesses. Given enough time, water could wear down even the hardest stone. That was what he had done. Found the openings, made small cuts, wore down the defenses. The most important thing, Han Solo said, was that the sword was just a tool. The real weapon was the person holding it. Any warrior could pick up his blade and it would still just be metal. But in his hands it became something more, because he had put 20 years of his life into learning how to use it. The sword was an extension of himself, an extension of all those years of training and discipline and dedication. Vrextal listened to all of this. The alien was quiet for a long moment. Then it spoke again. It said that it understood now. It had been wrong. Not just about this duel, but about many things. It had believed that newer was always better, that more power was always the answer, that ancient ways were inferior simply because they were old. The alien said that humans had taught it a lesson today, a painful lesson, but an important one. Sometimes the old ways were old because they worked, because they had been tested and refined over countless years, because they represented the accumulated wisdom of thousands of teachers and millions of students that had value. Real value, Hansol nodded. He extended his hand. An old human gesture of respect. After a moment, Vrextal reached out with one of its 4 hands and grasped Hansol's. The alien pulled itself to its feet. It was unsteady. The wounds were taking their toll. But the alien stood, faced Hansol, and bowed. A deep bow. A gesture of respect that meant the same thing in almost every culture across the galaxy. The crowd finally found its voice. But the sound was different now. Not cheering for one side or mocking the other. Instead, it was a sound of respect, of appreciation. They had witnessed something rare. Not just a duel, but a moment of understanding between 2 warriors from 2 very different worlds. The council leader's voice came through the speakers again. It declared that Hansol was the victor, that humanity's honor was satisfied, that all previous agreements would stand. Human ships would continue to have access to the trade routes. Human colonies would be protected under council law, and humans would have a voice in council decisions. But then Vrextal spoke up. The alien asked to address the council. Permission was granted. Vrextal said that it had a request. It wanted to learn from Hansol, to train under him, to understand these human techniques, not to copy them exactly, but to learn the principles behind them, to see if its own fighting style could be improved by incorporating some of this ancient wisdom. Hansol was surprised by the request. He looked at Jiwoo, who had come down from the stands and was now standing at the edge of the arena. She shrugged. The decision was his. He thought about it for a moment. Then he looked at Vrextal, at the respect in the alien's eyes, at the genuine desire to learn. Master Byung-ho had taught him that knowledge should be shared. The teaching others did not weaken you. It strengthened everyone. A rising tide lifted all boats, the old saying went. If sharing human techniques made the galaxy safer, made warriors more skilled, made everyone better, then that was a good thing. Hansol said yes. He would teach Vrextal, would share what he knew, but he warned that it would not be easy. The training would be long, difficult. It would require patience and dedication. The alien would have to set aside its pride, would have to start as a student, would have to accept correction and criticism. Was Vrextal prepared for that? The alien said yes without hesitation. After today, pride was something it had much less of, and that it realized was probably a good thing. Pride had made it underestimate Hansol. Pride had made it careless. Pride had cost it the duel. Perhaps having less pride would make it a better warrior. The 2 warriors walked out of the arena together. The crowd watched them go, human and alien, teacher and student. Former enemies now walking side by side. It was a strange sight, but somehow it felt right. Jiwoo fell into step beside Hansol. She did not say anything, did not need to. The small smile on her face said everything. They had done it. Against all odds, against all expectations, they had won. The council chambers looked different to Hansol now. 3 weeks had passed since the duel. The same high ceiling stretched above him. The same lights from 1,000 worlds glowed in the darkness. The same rows of seats curved around the floor. But the aliens sitting in those seats looked at him differently. Where there had been amusement and dismissal, there was now respect. Where there had been mockery, there was now curiosity. The formal session had ended an hour ago. But Hansol remained, standing in a corner of the great hall. He was talking with a group of alien military commanders. They asked questions about human combat training. about the philosophy behind the martial arts, about how such techniques could be adapted for their own species. Hansel answered as best he could. Some things could be shared easily. Others required understanding the human perspective on discipline and patience. Admiral Tae Young stood nearby, listening. The old man's face showed satisfaction. He had spent 40 years working to get humanity recognized by the Galactic Council. 40 years of careful diplomacy, of trade agreements, of proving that humans could be trusted partners. And then one duel had done more for humanity's reputation than all those years of work. Sometimes, the Admiral thought, the universe had a sense of irony. Jiwoo approached Hansel with a datapad. She waited patiently for a break in the conversation. When the commanders paused to discuss something among themselves, she leaned close and whispered. The communication logs were filled with requests. Dozens of species wanted to establish formal relations with Earth. Trade delegations wanted to visit human colonies. Universities wanted to exchange students and teachers. Military alliances were being proposed. Hansel looked at the list of names and numbers. It was overwhelming. A month ago, most of these species had barely acknowledged that humans existed. Now they all wanted to talk, wanted to work together, wanted to learn. He handed the datapad back to Jiwoo. She would handle the bureaucratic side of things. That was her strength. His strength was the sword, and right now he had a student waiting for him. The training hall was in a different part of the council complex. It was smaller than the grand arena, but still large enough for combat practice. The floor was covered in the same white sand. Vrextal was already there, going through warm-up exercises. The alien's wounds had healed well. The cuts that Hansel had made were now just thin scars, reminders of the lesson learned. Vrextal bowed when Hansel entered. It was a human-style bow. The alien had been practicing. The movement was still a bit awkward. The alien's body was not built for that particular gesture. But the intention was clear. Respect from student to teacher. Hansel returned the bow. Respect from teacher to student. Master Byung-ho had always said that respect flowed both ways. They began with the basics: stance, balance, breathing. Vrextal wanted to jump ahead to the advanced techniques, to the dramatic strikes and complex combinations. But Hansel insisted on starting at the beginning. These fundamentals were the foundation. Without a strong foundation, everything built on top of it would be weak. The alien grumbled but complied. It was learning patience. Slowly, other aliens had started to gather at the edges of the training hall. They came to watch. Some were warriors themselves. Others were simply curious. They wanted to see what human training looked like. What they saw surprised many of them. There was no shouting, no harsh criticism, no punishment for mistakes. Instead, Hansel would demonstrate a movement. Vrextal would try to copy it. Then Hansel would make small corrections. Adjust the angle of an arm, the position of a foot, the distribution of weight. It looked simple, almost boring, but those who understood combat could see the depth in it. Every tiny adjustment had a purpose. Every correction addressed a specific weakness. This was not about learning flashy moves. This was about building skill from the ground up, layer by layer, stone by stone, until the structure was so solid that nothing could knock it down. After the training session, Hansel returned to his quarters. The rooms assigned to the human delegation were comfortable, not luxurious but adequate. He sat on the floor and began his evening meditation. This was his routine. Training in the morning, diplomatic duties during the day, meditation in the evening, then sleep, then repeat. It was a simple life, but it was a good life. It had purpose. His sword hung on the wall. He looked at it while he meditated. The blade gleamed in the soft light. It had served him well in the duel, had not failed him when he needed it most. Soon he would clean it, oil it, care for it. The sword was a tool, yes, but it was also a responsibility. Generations of his family had cared for this blade. Now it was his turn, and one day, he would pass it on to someone else. The cycle would continue. A message came through on his communication device. He checked it. The council had made an official announcement. Human martial arts were now classified as Level 9 strategic assets, the highest classification. This meant that the techniques were recognized as having significant value. Other species could study them, but only with human permission. It also meant that Earth would receive protection. The council would defend human worlds if they were threatened. Han Sol read the announcement twice. Then he set the device aside. Level 9 classification was rare. Only a handful of things in the galaxy had that status. Advanced weapon systems, unique technologies, ancient knowledge, and now human swordsmanship. It was strange to think about. For thousands of years, humans had practiced these arts for their own sake, for discipline, for self-improvement, for tradition, and now the galaxy recognized their value. But the classification also brought responsibility. Han Sol would need to be careful about who he taught, about what he shared. Some techniques were dangerous in the wrong hands. Some required a certain mindset to use properly. Master Byung-ho had been selective about his students. He had turned away people who wanted to learn only for the wrong reasons. People who wanted power without wisdom, strength without restraint. Han Sol would need to be just as careful. The next morning brought another session with Vrextal. The alien was improving, not dramatically, but steadily. The movements were becoming smoother, more natural. The alien was starting to understand that combat was not just about strength. It was about timing, about reading your opponent, about staying calm under pressure. These were lessons that took time to truly learn. But Vrextal was committed. The alien arrived early to each session, stayed late, practiced between lessons. Other students had joined the training now. A warrior from a species that looked like walking crystals. Another from a species that lived in water and wore mechanical suits on land. A third from a species that Han Sol could not even identify. They all wanted to learn. All wanted to understand what made human martial arts effective. Han Sol accepted them, but he set clear expectations. This would be hard. Progress would be slow. There would be days when they felt like they were getting worse instead of better. That was normal. That was part of the process. Jiwoo visited him one evening. She brought news from Earth. The planet was celebrating. Streets were filled with people cheering. The government had declared a holiday. Statues were being planned. Han Sol found this embarrassing. He had only done what he was trained to do. What any of Master Byung-ho's students could have done. The duel had been important, yes, but it was not something to celebrate with statues and holidays. Jiwoo laughed at his discomfort. She said he should let people celebrate. They needed heroes. Needed something to be proud of. For years, humans had felt like the newcomers to the galaxy, the species that arrived late, that had less technology, less power, less status, and now they had proof that being human meant something, that their traditions had value, that old ways were not always inferior ways. Han Sol supposed she was right. He just hoped the celebrations did not go too far. Pride could be dangerous. It was pride that had made Vrextal underestimate him. Pride that had led to the alien's defeat. Humans needed to be confident, yes, but also humble. Aware of their limitations. Always learning. Always improving. The moment you thought you knew everything was the moment you stopped growing. Weeks turned into months. The training continued. The diplomatic work continued. More species reached out to humanity. Trade increased. Cultural exchanges began. Human teachers traveled to alien worlds. Alien students came to Earth. The galaxy was changing, slowly but changing. And at the center of much of that change was a simple sword. An old piece of metal that had proven to be worth more than anyone had imagined. Admiral Tae-young retired. His work was done. Humanity was secure in the galaxy now. Respected, valued, protected. At his retirement ceremony, he spoke briefly. He said that the greatest weapons were not the ones that destroyed enemies. They were the ones that made friends out of enemies. That turned rivals into allies. That built bridges instead of walls. The sword that Han Sol carried had done all of those things. Han Sol continued his work. Training Vrextal and the other students. Meeting with council members. Representing humanity. But he never forgot where he came from. Every morning he practiced the basic forms that Master Byung-ho had taught him 20 years ago. Every evening he meditated. Every night he cleaned his sword. These routines kept him grounded. Kept him focused. Vrextal stumbled forward. The alien had put so much power into that strike that when it missed, the momentum carried it several steps past where Han Sol had been standing. The crowd's gasp turned into confused murmurs. That was not supposed to happen. Humans were slow. Everyone knew that. Humans had poor reflexes compared to most species. How had this one moved so fast? The alien spun around, anger flashing in its black eyes. It attacked again. this time with two arms swinging the plasma blade in wide arcs. The other two arms reached out to grab Han Solo. It was a smart tactic. If the blade did not get him, the arms would. There would be nowhere to dodge. Han Solo did not try to dodge this time. Instead, he moved forward. Toward the alien. Toward the danger. It was the last thing anyone expected. Master Byung-ho had taught him this. When your enemy expects you to retreat, advance. When they expect you to go left, go right. Do what they do not anticipate. Become unpredictable like water flowing around rocks. He moved inside the arc of the plasma blade, inside the reach of those grasping arms. For a fraction of a second, he was in the safest place on the arena floor, right in front of Rextal. Too close for the blade to reach, too close for the arms to grab properly, and in that fraction of a second, Han Solo's sword moved. The strike was so fast that most of the crowd did not see it. One moment the sword was at Han Solo's side. The next moment it had drawn a line across Rextal's chest armor and returned to its position. The whole movement took less than a heartbeat. There was no dramatic flourish, no wasted motion, just pure efficiency. For a moment nothing seemed to happen. Rextal continued its attack. The plasma blade swung. The arms reached. Then there was a sound. A thin, sharp sound like crystal breaking. A hairline crack appeared in Rextal's chest armor. The crack ran from the left shoulder to the right hip. A perfectly straight line. The armor had been made from quantum-hardened alloy. It was supposed to be nearly indestructible. And yet there was a crack. The alien looked down at its chest. It stopped attacking. It stared at the crack in disbelief. How? Its armor had withstood plasma fire. It had withstood explosive rounds. It had withstood energy weapons from a dozen different species. How could a simple piece of metal have cut it? Han Solo stepped back. He resumed his stance. His breathing was still calm, still controlled. The sword in his hands did not shake. Not even a little. Some of the aliens in the crowd began to understand that this might not be as simple as they had thought. This human was not lucky. That strike had been precise, deliberate, practiced, Rextal roared. The sound was different now. There was rage in it, and something else. Something that might have been the first tiny seed of doubt. The alien activated its shield generators. Blue energy shimmered into existence around its body. These shields could stop laser fire. They could deflect projectiles. They would stop this primitive sword. The alien charged again, this time with no attempt at strategy, just pure aggression. The plasma blade came at Han Solo from different angles, high, low, left, right. Each strike was powerful enough to kill instantly. Each strike left glowing trails in the air. The heat was intense. The sand beneath their feet was starting to melt into glass from the energy being thrown around. Han Solo moved like he was dancing. Each attack came at him and found only air. His feet traced patterns in the sand, patterns that martial artists had perfected over thousands of years. Forward, back, left, right, spin, step. Each movement flowed into the next. There was no hesitation, no wasted energy. He was not thinking anymore. His body knew what to do. And each time Rextal committed to an attack, Han Solo's sword would flash out. A quick strike. A precise cut. The blade would touch the shield for just a moment and then withdraw. The shield would flicker. Spark. The first few times nothing happened. The shield held. But Master Byung-ho had taught patience. He had taught that you do not need to break through a wall with one strike. Sometimes you tap it 100 times, 1,000 times, until it crumbles. The 5th strike made the shield flicker badly. The 10th strike made it fail for a fraction of a second. The 15th strike went through. The blade touched Rextal's arm. Just a touch, the lightest contact. But it was enough. A thin red line appeared on the alien's skin. The first blood of the duel. The crowd went silent. Completely silent. It was unnatural. Thousands of beings all holding their breath at the same moment. They had come to see Rextal destroy a human. Instead, they were watching the human draw first blood. The impossible was happening right in front of them. Rextal looked at its arm. At the thin line of blood, the alien's breathing was heavy now. Not from tiredness, though the constant attacking was taking its toll, but from something else. From the realization that this fight was not going the way it should. This human should be dead, should be bleeding in the sand, should be begging for mercy. But instead, the human was untouched, unmarked, still calm. Still ready, the alien changed tactics. It stopped the wild attacks. Instead, it began to fight more carefully, more defensively, The plasma blade moved in controlled patterns, creating a barrier of energy. The alien watched Hansol closely, trying to predict his movements, trying to find a pattern. This was more dangerous. Master Byung-ho had warned about this. A careful opponent was harder to fight than an aggressive one. Aggression left openings. Caution did not. Hansol would need to create an opening. He would need to make Vrextal commit to something. Make a mistake, Hansol feinted. He moved as if he was going to strike at Vrextal's left side. The alien raised its blade to block. But Hansol's real attack came from the right. The sword moved in a tight arc. The blade cut through the air. It struck the alien's leg. Not deep, but enough. Another line of blood appeared. The alien stumbled slightly. Vrextal swung wildly, the pain and frustration overwhelming its training. The plasma blade came at Hansol in a horizontal slash. Fast, powerful. If it connected, it would cut him in half. Hansol dropped low. The blade passed over his head. He could feel the heat of it on his hair. Then he was moving again. His sword struck twice. Once at the alien's knee, once at its wrist. The alien's grip on the plasma blade weakened. Not much, but enough that it had to adjust how it held the weapon. 3 cuts now. 3 small wounds that were starting to add up. Vrextal was bleeding. The alien was slowing down. Not dramatically, but Hansol could see it. Could feel it. The movements were a fraction of a second slower. The attacks were a fraction less precise. In the viewing box, Admiral Tae-young allowed himself a small smile. He recognized what Hansol was doing. It was an old strategy, one that small armies had used against large ones throughout human history. You did not try to win with one decisive blow. You made many small cuts. You wore down your enemy. You made them tired, made them frustrated, made them make mistakes, and then, when they were weakened, you finished it. The other aliens in the diplomatic boxes were starting to lean forward in their seats. Some were making urgent gestures to each other. Some were accessing data on their communication devices, trying to understand what they were seeing. A few, the military commanders among them, were beginning to realize that their understanding of humans had been incomplete. Dangerously incomplete. Vrextal attacked again, but the aliens' movements were becoming predictable. The same patterns repeated, the same angles of attack. Hansol had seen them all now. His sword met each strike, not blocking directly, that would break the blade. Instead deflecting, redirecting, using the alien's own force against it. Water flowing around stone, wind moving past mountains. Another cut appeared on Vrextal's shoulder, another on its hip. The alien was covered in small wounds now. None of them were life-threatening. But together they were weakening it, slowing it. The bright blue armor was now stained with dark blood. The shield generators had failed completely. The alien stood in the center of the arena, breathing hard, looking at the human who refused to die.